We're going to do sort of like a series of 1 hour talks through the day, 1 hour, 15-minute talks. So thanks very much for getting here, because I weren't sure anyone would turn up at 10 o'clock in the morning, to be honest.
Neither was I.
First day back. But yeah, the plan is to be able to see someone like Gary here, or if you miss this talk, then he's doing another talk later in the day, or you sort of cajole him around the campfires at night, so you can have that sort of interaction with some of the speakers on a more one-to-one level. We've asked Gary here today to talk about, he says, the natural technologies of the ancient world. If you go on his Facebook, he does some beautiful blogs almost of some of the sites he does and some of the tours he does. And it's, as I said to me, I went to Cairo 5 years ago and I didn't know nothing. I looked at the pyramid like a building. So and then, as I said, over the last year or so, I've been watching what Gary does, and just photographs of like one rock with a little symbol on it, a hole drilled through it, and you start to get a better understanding of the technologies that were used. I went to the pyramid and there was a bloke did a little tour, and he says this is where the slaves pull the blocks, and even people listening to it were like, come on now, would you ever stop? But because it's an official tour, they have to say official sort of like answers, which is why Gary's an alternative to the view of Egypt and the ancient technologies. So let's say welcome to him, and let's say thanks very much for the first call. Cheers.
Yeah, and thank you for coming. It's a good turnout, as you said, for this time of the day. So the way I've split it up is this presentation looks at the kind of spiritual experiences and how we can develop ourselves, personal development, and the kind of things our ancestors might have been doing that the established science still hasn't been able to prove. But we can go to these places, have singular experiences, group experiences, and they have a meaningful impact on our lives. So I want to share what I've learned on my journey, and then the workshop immediately following this will be looking at some of those tools that we can all use. The effects of sound on our body and the interaction with our mind and that kind of thing, and we might do some group work as well, some chanting and things, because there's a power in group sound. It's not just about the individual, and that is something that the pyramids and the temples in Egypt have taught me. So now hopefully I can share that with you here today. So it was going to be an hour and a half, so I will skip through a few parts that are kind of flexible, and we're cut to the chase, and I should be able to catch up on the time then. So I called it natural technologies because I do work with a group of researchers, and rather than this kind of way of imposing ourselves on the natural world, our ancestors were more of working in harmony with planetary and universal forces. And if you can interact with that kind of power, I mean, it's a completely different level to our explosion type technology. So we look at some of the evidence that they were doing that. And I'll keep this bit short. So my day job is as an agent to a lot of the alternative history authors. So I represent people like Graham Hancock and Robert Bauval. Here's us in Egypt in the top left. It's a bit dark, the screen, huh? Is there any way of brightening the screen up? Yeah. And this was just to give a demonstration of me out. This is in Peru, where with the huge megaliths. That's Brian Forster from the Ancient Aliens show. That's me with the friends I work with in Egypt, and that's the view from their house. And this is me in the snow with Maria Wheatley, who's giving the talk in the other room at the moment. So I'm out in all conditions, sun, snow, trying to research these things to share with people. And as a result of working with lots of the ancient alternative history authors, I've had a chance on location to look at the evidence, talk to them about their work. And I mean, a lot of these guys have been looking at these subjects for 30 or 40 years. And when you can talk to them in person, it's a bit different to having them on a stage talking to you. So my first thing is, well, tell me everything you know from 30 to 40 years so I can combine it into me. And I've been doing pretty well, I'd say, working my way around my favourite guys. So I just wanted, before I started to visit a lot of these ancient sites, it's like I felt compelled to visit them but why is it relevant today is the question I always come back to. Why should I be talking to other people? What difference does it make to your life today and tomorrow? And the heartwarming thing from spending a lot of time at these places is that Egypt does still have lessons for us today. It's the one place I've visited that I feel I've learned the most about myself. Who am I really? What's my kind of soul's purpose here? And strip away the education. This is kind of drummed into us. This is what you should do with your life, or what our parents want us to do. What did I come here for? So I think I've been making some steps in that direction. And it's really to get away from this approach of the teacher and the student, because I would say 80% of the time I'm the student. There's so much to learn. More things down here to learn than one incarnation would allow me to. So I'm kind of trying to focus on what's relevant, what I can share to help others, what allows me to grow and move forwards, and just sort of focus on that side of things. And this is the kind of an interesting point. When we're looking at ancient sites, this is Tiwanaku in Peru, so today modern view on the right, but this is how they found it in the early 1900s. So this has all been reconstructed. So when a lot of us are coming up with theories or speculation, if we're going to base it on how the site looks today, it doesn't fit the picture of how these sites were found. So we can lose sight of what was there originally. And this next slide is just to give an idea of the kind of easy ways that we can interact with the natural environment. This is a kind of control over water in Peru. You have to watch quickly. I might have to back it up for you. Did you catch that? Do you need to show it again? It's how the speed of the water flow changes with just the swipe of a finger at the front.
Again.
Yeah, it normally needs a second showing. So you got one speed of flow and then a second speed. It's slow. Fast. And so it kind of boggles the mind, because you're looking at it and there is a sort of slightly darker colour of stone, but why should it change the water flow when you tap it with your finger? We don't have the answer to that one at the moment. So really, have we got the right picture when we're looking at our ancestors and our history? And from what I've seen, no, we haven't. We've certainly lost a lot of understandings of the symbolic and this way of integrating our societies into the natural world. This is the Tree of Life at Karnak Temple. And when we start to look at these kind of images from Egypt through, you could say, metaphysical or Reiki eyes. I mean, here we've got somebody kind of doing a Reiki healing, and this figure's feeding the key of life, which is a symbol that we see throughout Egypt. So what were they trying to tell us that they were up to? What kind of control over the spiritual development did they have that we've lost track of? So I'm just going to move around a few places on this map, because I've basically done the entire length of the Nile up in the delta to Abu Simbel in the south. This is just the kind of things that we get up to in Egypt, trying to work out what the pyramid has to say to us. And this is a good example of how things can get misconstrued over the internet, because we see these fantastical images. And I mean, anyone that's watched Ancient Aliens, this symbol with this little head on the top looks very much like a spacecraft or something. And then we have these amazing hands, the Ankh, the key of life with the arms and things. So if we're going to look at it through our modern cultural lens, we might see an alien, but if we strip that away, how we view the world today, they were probably trying to portray something completely different. And it is difficult to get past our cultural mindset to look beyond these things. So we're just going to move down to Abu Simbel in the south, and this is where I feel I learned a very interesting lesson about how we can look at the hieroglyphic symbols in a completely different way, because there's still a lot of debate over the interpretation of them. We can translate it literally to a certain degree, but the Egyptians sort of dealt in layers of symbolism, and those are the layers that we've had trouble penetrating. So I just wanted to include like a few little video clips of the sites, because when I'm trying to describe these places to you, a simple photograph like that doesn't convey the feeling of being there. I mean, it's an amazing atmosphere. Quite often you have this sort of bird song. These places, like, kind of, they're alive. Some of the temples you visit, the cats come out and visit and say hello when you turn up, and it's, yeah, just a magical place. So I wanted to kind of take you there with me before I started to go into some of the deeper stuff that I've experienced. So this is just a couple of a quick walk into the temple. And this is so Abu Simbel, which sadly they did have to move. When they constructed the Aswan Dam, this temple would have been under the lake water level, so they had to chop it up in the 1960s, very sadly, and move the whole thing up and create a kind of artificial mountain around it. And there's a view that because the temple's been moved, it's lost its kind of sacred space and its power. But from my experience of visiting there and another island, the Philae, which we talk about in a bit, they do still have a power. Of course, I can't compare it to how it was, but I can say it's still worth us visiting there today. And this temple, on certain dates of the year, the sun comes straight down, and we've been there, and it illuminates the statues at the end, and it's quite spectacular. So that was us entering. And one of the let's show you this. This is very interesting, as he's got his hand with his dots going into the pot. I mean, what are they trying to... It's like they're charging something and then presenting it. Is it still too dark at the back?
It's full brightness on the projector, then the Mac has got brightness reduction.
Okay, well that's my full brightness. That's as good as it's getting then. But what I wanted to show, and this picture will probably give us a good demonstration. You won't be able to see particularly easy, but these hieroglyphics are actually cut in at an angle. So they're not cut straight into the rock, but they're kind of beveled. And I was travelling around with a girlfriend who was a graphic designer, and I said to her, why have they cut them in this way? And she said, well, that's beveling and something that we do in graphic design to give a 3D image. And I thought, so they're obviously trying to create some kind of a 3D image with our eyes. And one of the things that I study in my yoga classes, my yoga teacher's often talking about how we channel our vision, because we're using modern technology, so we're normally focused straight in front of us. But from the Eastern traditions, we can use our peripheral vision, so we're looking out here. And I was kind of trying to play around with the way that I was perceiving these symbols. And when I was in the room that I just showed you, I've been trying sort of fruitlessly at different temples and things to tune in or see some kind of 3D image, and I was thinking it would just raise very slightly off of the rock face. And I just sat down in this chamber and just relaxed, and then all of a sudden the whole of the hieroglyphic wall jumped off the wall about 4 feet in front of me, and it was like suspended in mid-air, just the same as when we go to 3D cinema, like I could touch the images. And my first thought was, shit, I don't know how I created this to happen in the first place, and as soon as I change my eyes it's just going to kind of evaporate. But before it did disappear, I could feel this kind of, the information was flowing into my third eye, so I was perceiving it, but it was also giving me information. And I've certainly gone through a number of transformations when I've returned home from Egypt. I've come back to England and my head's just felt completely full, like I can't put any more information into it. But those days have transitioned somewhat. And really, as I do organise tours to power spots around the world, but what I'm really focused on is, okay, well, we've got all of these locations in Egypt, but where can I consistently take people to that they have some kind of deeper understanding, epiphanies, or we have these amazing group experiences? Because then when we put the tours together, we can focus on these experiences as a part of the tour, a fundamental part, because our personal development and spiritual growth is the #1 thing for me. I mean, why did we come here, is the question I ask. So we focus the tours around this, and the Temple of Isis is somewhere that is incredibly powerful, and this statement I put at the bottom is the only way that I can really put our experiences into words. And we will have a look at, that's the temple. I'll just show you a brief. So you always approach it by boat, and it's normally a very bright blue sky. Doesn't look like it in the video. And I mean, it's very, very beautiful. We've had just like the most perfect days in this part of Egypt. I think we've agreed as a group, it's like, okay, well, this day is good enough. We just have this for the rest of our lives. I don't think it's going to get any more blissful than that. And this is just a reconstruction of what it would have looked like. And this is the real object of my desire, we could say. And we did quite well in April this year. Normally, this room's very tightly controlled. You have groups of people coming in and out, and you don't get very long. But just if you place your hands on this block, I mean, the energy coming out of it is absolutely incredible. And it's the same as if you'd taken something to kind of alter your state of consciousness. And the longer that you spend talking about it, I mean, it's quite addictive. And so I normally have a little routine where I kind of take the guests in. If a tour comes in, I move us out of the way. And then once the coast's clear, I move us in as a group again. And well, we had guests in December last year with me that said they just felt like they'd been plugged into the universe by holding this stone. And it's something that you retain as well. So it's good for a spiritual charge up. And before I started doing the tours, I didn't even know these kind of places existed, so it's been a revelation to me. And this is, there's a little girl, her entire job is taking photos for tourists with the Sphinx, so she knows all of these interesting little poses. And one of the other things when we're talking about Egypt is they did have some kind of crystal technology. And before I kind of got into these subjects, I used to think, oh, crystals, that's kind of woo-woo. There's not really anything tangible there. But as I've sort of become more sensitive, a lot of these things have very subtle effects on us. So yeah, if you're just going to grab a crystal and expect it to change your life for the best, perhaps not. But if you work with it over a period of time and different crystals and combine that with different spiritual practices, these kind of subtle effects on our energy system and point of view gradually accumulate, and crystals is definitely one of those things that is capable of helping us. And the things that I've seen in Egypt, I mean, we're almost talking kind of Superman technology where you've got these crystals plugged in and there's things happening. They definitely knew something that we don't. So there's a lot of crystal evidence around. That is a sphinx made out of just alabaster crystal. It's a bit dark, and that was just to show the crystal. Maybe this one will be better, but this is the kind of crystal that they're building structures out of, integrating, and we'll look at what they were integrating with it in a minute. So yeah, crystal buildings. I didn't know there were crystal buildings. So this they call a shrine at Karnak Temple, which is the world's largest temple. And admittedly it has been repaired. This is concrete repairs, this is a crystal, but still it is a crystal building. And when we're doing our sound work, and we know about crystal and how it can resonate, these old structures, the room that we look at in the Great Pyramid, crystal is in the stone, and it's the same at Stonehenge. They're using a crystalline sandstone. So why were they using crystal at these places? And this is a good demonstration of why, because we can go inside this room, and when we use the sound resonance, you can feel the whole field around you. And I mean, rationally, I can try and work out exactly what's happening. Is it the kind of memory of this crystal of over the eons of people in there with the right intention that we pick up on? Or is it just elevating my consciousness because it's a higher frequency? I mean, there's probably a few of these things going on. And so I was toning right in the middle of that room, and the guests with me, it was quite a moving experience. I mean, we felt something happening, and then when I stopped toning, we suddenly heard this meow, 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 and out of nowhere, this cat arrived. So he came meow, 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 right up to my feet, looked up at me, and then meow, 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 walked off. And it's the kind of thing that happens in Egypt. It's like there's something going on the other side that he's picked up on, and he's just kind of come to show me. I mean, I can't prove there was something happening, but it's strange behaviour for a cat nonetheless. And just because we felt something so powerful, I mean, from our perspective, we realised that he'd picked up on it as well. So this is, again, lots of crystal around, crystal bases of columns, and that kind of gives you the perspective. I put the bottle of water there. So it's, yeah, it's quite incredible. Right. That is actually me ready to be sent off on my way, but it's a bit dark. So we're going to go to Abu Sir and Abu Ghurab, and this is about 10 miles south of the Great Pyramid and the Giza Plateau. It's a site that's closed to the public, and there's some amazing evidence there. So let's have a look, because it does fill in a few of the gaps of what they might have been up to at the other sites. And so this is where we can see the direct evidence for the use of water and crystal, which is what we think they were doing on the Giza Plateau. This is just to give you a kind of sense of where we are. I mean, there's no other tourists around. I was just walking out. This is Yusuf Awan, the son of an indigenous wisdom keeper, Hakim, who I organised the tours with. So we're just going to wander out into the desert. So this is a channel. I mean, you can only assume that they've got water going through this place when you've got something like that, unless anyone's got a better suggestion.
So here we are, and you see two pyramids. Come here to see something very strange. This is quartzite stone.
And they use a lot of different stones interacting with each other. There's one way they're doing it.
We have granite, limestone, and this would appear to be water tube. We follow the channel here. To a basin. We also have
brief balls.
what appear to be sloped casing stones.
I'm going somewhere with this, you'll see in a minute.
What we can say is they're definitely collecting something.
Okay.
over there.
So there's a lot of alternative theories about the interaction of water with pyramids, and there we saw the casing stones of a sloped casing stone, so there was some kind of small pyramid there, but also a channel coming out and they're collecting water. So then we're beyond speculation there, and we saw the channel that was going around the temple, and so this kind of started me to think, well, what would they be doing? If they were doing something with water, what would we want to do with water? And with the thought that we're 70 to 80% water and the sort of spiritual development side of it in my head. And there is a site next door that we will go to, Abu Ghraib, and this really I think is the smoking gun for my theory. So this is the direct evidence of crystal and water technology. And so we've got these these are alabaster crystal, these basins, and they were found all around this area, and they lined them up, and so the story goes that they were going to take them off to the Cairo Museum or somewhere. But they can't really put, I mean, they could put ritual object, as they quite like to label things. They don't know what they're for, and because they're so strange, they just decided to leave them at this site that's closed to the public, and that way they don't have to keep answering questions about them. So let's have a look a bit closer. Yeah, brighten up in a minute. Because I want you to see the holes with the water in, which had come up. I was the only tourist there. I think it was a Egyptian holiday.
This is the one.
So here's the hole.
Yes, and admired.
And these are interesting features, these holes around the edge. And it's engineering.
Yeah, the one that is. This mastab over there is all made from white.
Oh, this is the one.
We'll see this bit in a minute. It's too dark there. So, that's the crystal bowls. They also have these versions, which I think were sandstone with 3 holes, so they looks like they're splitting water in different directions. The only kind of theory that the Egyptologists have is that these crystal bowls were used for some kind of sacrifice for animals, which is, I think, something they like to label things, because it's not very attractive, so it puts people off. But this is white crystal, and there would be evidence for blood. My friend Yusuf works with stone. They've got a stonemason's shop, and blood would stain the white crystal very, very badly, particularly over a period of time. And it's just dirt. There wasn't any evidence for blood. And so next to it, this is a huge crystal platform. I mean, there's a person for scale. It's made into 4 sections, and if I'd had time I would have added a new slide, but we found a smaller version of this crystal platform that was called an offering table in a museum in Alexandria, and so it's really tying in with alchemy. This is the offering tables that we call them offering tables. It's an alchemical process, transmutation. And so there's a small version, and then at this site there was this huge version, which is something else that points to the fact that they were perhaps doing some kind of transmutation of the soul, expanding their awareness of the universe. And we've had some very nice meditations in that spot. Apparently under the round centre there is a shaft that goes down to the water table. So, we do a lot of work in Egypt with sound. We've seen evidence for water and crystal. And I was talking to a friend in America, and he said, well, what happens if you put water into like a crystal bowl, which we look at in the workshop I've got my crystal bowl, so we can feel the sound frequencies that I'm talking about coming off of that for anyone that hasn't used them. But it was an interesting experiment that we ran, and I'll share with you what happens.
Experiment A. What happens with water inside a crystal singing bowl?
So it's all bubbling in, and this happens very quickly.
It's getting hot.
Really?
Yes.
It is bubbling.
So, I mean, the reason that we carried out this experiment was because if we could charge the water in some way, because I was starting to think about how you could charge water, that's probably what they were doing at this site in Egypt, and if we had charged water in our body, would it allow a greater level of consciousness? Would it sort of give us a greater sense of clarity? And because we're 70 to 80% water and generally pay so little attention, certainly the normal people do, to the level of water they're putting in their body. But what happened? What if there was a better way, something that you could do? So that was kind of where this experiment was going. So we wanted to charge the water, drink it, and then what happened? Well, what happened was it was like we'd taken something pretty powerful, and we were like really kind of feeling good, happy, uplifted. And the guy that was doing the bowl normally gets to sleep kind of 11, 12 at night, and he couldn't get to sleep till 4 in the morning. So he was really wired from this, and it is something that I continue to do in England, and it does have a noticeable effect. Definitely has a noticeable effect. That was just the kind of things we get up to. So Luxor Temple is where I've definitely had probably the biggest lesson of my life, or gained the greatest understanding about our role down here. And let's just have a little quick walk through until we talk about an experience there. And it is just majestic at night time. Right in the middle of Luxor city.
It's so big, you can't even get it in.
It's very dark. And we did a tour in April with Chris Dunn, who's an engineer. He's in Ancient Aliens a lot of the time, and he's looked at this face. So he split it in half and folded one half onto the other, and it's perfect to the millimetre. So when we're saying that the ancient Egyptians were carving things by eye, and they're making statues that are to the same perfection that we could create with our computer technology and lathes, it does have to ask some questions, and they consistently did it. And it does raise some big questions about exactly how they were constructing these statues with some of the hardest stones on earth that we need diamond tools to create. So this photo is normally dark, so I've got no chance on this screen, but this is a huge courtyard, and here is a big slope coming up into this courtyard, and it's probably about that high. And one of the things that I'd noticed in the temples in Egypt, because I'm very much into walking through barefooted and feeling the energies and things, and when I was walking through some of the temples and there were steps, when I walked up the steps I noticed that suddenly I was walking into a more powerful energetic environment, and it was a pattern that I noticed. It kind of came to mind even when I wasn't thinking about it, so it did seem to be a tangible effect that they were creating. It was like they were marking on the floor that your consciousness is raising as you walked up. And so this is the biggest slope that we can't see, and so I was walking through the temple with one of the guests on the tour, Petra, and we walked up to the top of the slope, and we're both barefooted, and I said to her, well, if my theory is correct about this being a more powerful place at the top of an elevation. Let's just see what we can feel here. And it's normally the case, like if you're not looking for something or you're kind of busy talking or taking photos, you're not going to notice it. So just the intention to stop and see what you can feel in the environment is a very powerful thing to do. And as soon as we did that and just kind of opened up, it was like this energy came in to my feet, and it was like really kind of powerful. And just in between the thumb and the forefinger it was sort of shaking there, like the nerve was kind of pulsing. And I was looking at my hand thinking, oh my God, is there really so much energy coming into my body it's making my hand twitch? And as I was thinking it, Petra says, oh my God, there's so much energy coming into my body it's making my hand twitch. And it was like, whoa, do. So that's the kind of thing that tells me, okay, well we're obviously in an interesting environment here. And so I said, well, let's just go and sit down round the corner and just tune in and just kind of embrace this moment and see where we go. And as it turned out, it was the start of an incredible group experience. And the Luxor Temple, John Anthony West, does anyone know that name? So he's, well, one of his greatest inspirations, Schwaller de Lubitz, which his work is almost impenetrable. I mean, it's very heavy stuff. I'm working through it very, very slowly. But he called Luxor Temple the Temple of Man, that the temple was laid out in the shape of a human body. And I mean, you could take that as a symbology that perhaps this was a temple to go and learn about the human body, or what the reason for the human body is. And it was just this quote that meant something to me after the experience I'm going to describe. So he's asking the question, is the Luxor Temple capable of connecting us to higher realms? Well, as we're discussing in a minute, I would say yes, it most definitely is. And this guy spent 20 years there and had a good sort of scientific training for the day, various disciplines, but also a keen eye on the symbolism and the metaphysical. So he was capable of seeing things a lot of our academics might not be able to. And this is the chamber, maybe that's a bit brighter. So this is the inner sanctum, the most powerful part of the temple, the Holy of Holies in Christian terms. And there's a little guy there. So we just, and because it was after the revolution in 2011, normally this place would have hundreds of tourists pouring through it. When I was there in 2010, this room was so full of people I couldn't even go in there. So as bad as it is for the Egyptian people in terms of being a tourist, the times that have been troubling have given us opportunities to tune in at these places that were previously not possible. And so we do feel very blessed to have these opportunities. So here we are. This is actually a photo of the group. I think one of the other members of our tour, because normally what happens is we have a tour that's covering lots of different aspects, engineering, astronomy, these kind of things. And I lead the kind of, you could say, the ceremonial side, or try and share my perspective of tuning in to self-empower people. Doesn't have to be somebody in between us and the universe. We've all got the universe flowing through us. It's just that we've forgotten to the kind of extent that we can feel it directly. So these kind of experiences are what reinforce that in my mind, rather than it just being an intellectual idea. It's direct experience, which is how I think we all learn best. So I sort of started us off with a group meditation, and I'd been spending a lot of time in the Great Pyramid using different sound and things. And I felt that I'd learned this technique where I could pull my consciousness up from the base of the spine. And it's like I kind of see it as the analogy of the Kundalini serpent that kind of unfolds and your consciousness comes up, and then that's how it feels. Your energy rises and suddenly you have access to these amazing levels of awareness. So I thought, well, let's share this technique that I've been using by myself with the group and see what happens. And what happened was something that even surprised me. And after the experience, I thought, well, if I want to try and convey this experience to a group of people in an audience, how on earth am I going to do it? Because I used to sit in an audience and hear people saying these kind of fantastical stories, and I'd either think, okay, well, that guy's a bit crazy, that's probably never going to happen to me. Or, I mean, it didn't really mean a lot to me. And it is difficult to convey these kind of things. So the only tool I had at my disposal was to talk to some of the guests on the tour and ask them about their experience. So one of the ladies gave me a quote to use, and when I read this quote, I just said, well, can you write down your experience? When she sent me the quote, it was like, my God, she really did experience exactly the same thing as me. So it was interesting. If I'm having this amazing experience, but if other people are having the same time, then it's not just Gary going mad, it's either a group of people going mad together or there's some kind of tangible experience happening. Hopefully the second of those options. So I use Petra's words just to share this story. So she says, having walked barefoot with my friend Gary on these sacred grounds, not knowing about Schwaller's idea of sacred architecture and the perfect man at that time, I gathered there with a small group of a handful of wonderful and spiritually open people with the intention of doing a short meditation. We sat down in a circle without much hesitating, and it seemed everybody knew where his exact place was. And within less than microseconds, I felt literally catapulted out of my body, flowing into the wide light and heavenly realm of another dimension, feeling like paradise and being connected with everything what is, was, and ever will be. Just bliss. Consciousness returning back to where it's infinitely free and where its true home is. Infinity, peacefulness, love. A state of being you never want to leave again. But it was not the first time that I've experienced this mind-blowing state of existence. It already happened in a similar way before. For example, when lying in the resonance box in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid for the first time in my life. Maybe you could also call it a cosmic orgasm in a non-physical way, when all becomes one in the highest sense we can be aware of. And then she goes on to say, to my opinion, the purpose and ability of ancient sacred sites and incarnated sacred men and women all over the world is to support the human soul to gain higher reconnection and insights when being approached in a humble and unexpectant, loving and grateful attitude, in order to make them learn and understand that love is all that is. Having been blessed with this experience, life will never be the same as before. And so that was her perspective. And then we've got this young guy here, Amadeus, I think he was 20 at the time, from New Zealand, and he just said, well, Luxor was a particularly strange one for me in a good way. I felt more than any other site that it contained its own energy. While we were in there, I felt very disconnected from the outside, even knowing how busy it was right outside. This culminated in the group meditation we had in the heart of the temple. I felt very much like almost I'd gone through a cave system, and that the experience I had while meditating was the secret to be found deep inside. And what I've been looking at recently, there does seem to be a few reports of the initiates in ancient Egypt that were perhaps given the title the Twice Born. I'm still trying to track down some sources for this. But if we're talking about a mystery school, I mean, what is the major point of having a mystery school? And it kind of seemed logical to me that if the process was separating consciousness from the body, that was the ultimate lesson, then when you came back into the body, you would have a completely different perspective on life, wouldn't you? I mean, you're going to see well beyond this kind of stuff. And we're getting there with the latest physics and things. I mean, we've all got beyond understanding that this is as solid as it seems. We know it's made out of all these very small vibrating particles, and they seem to have this understanding back in ancient Egypt and perhaps before. So I think the process of guessing at the moment, or my working theory, is that we're born into the body. Most of us don't have a conscious recollection of being on the other side, because I think there's a good reason to come in with a clean slate. As I understand it, we don't have to remember the kind of past life trauma and our exit from our last body. I mean, we don't want to know about that kind of stuff in this lifetime. I'm sure you're like me, we build up enough emotional trauma and our kind of interactions with people in this lifetime to play on the mind. So coming in with a clean slate is a good thing from that perspective. But then if we're going to think about our soul's evolution, how we treat other people, how we treat the environment, these kind of subjects, not having memory of reincarnation is then a hurdle to overcome. So if we can have an initiation where you could say older people, once we've gone through the kind of adolescence, you then separate consciousness from the body and consciousness is rebirthed, then you've got recall of the other side. Because when I was over there, I mean, it was just amazing, undescribable. Petra did as good a job as anyone I know. Just a feeling of unconditional love. It was a very familiar feeling, like I'd been there before, and like that was where I came from before I incarnated, and that's where I'll return to. That was the sensation. But it also gives you a greater understanding of your impact on others and why we come here. And we just skip over to another site that's worth knowing if anyone's going to Peru. There's the doorway of a Maramuru, which is often called a stargate or portal. So I wanted to go down there and decide for myself whether it was some kind of special place or if it was just a lot of hearsay misleading people. And it didn't disappoint me, I have to say. Here's me in my bare feet, always there, and standing barefoot in front of this doorway. I mean, the energy that was coming into my body, it was almost like the sensation of having the best chocolate or some really good kind of sex. I mean, it was an amazing feeling coming into the body, so I'd highly recommend it. It's well worth a visit there.
What, sex?
All of it. All of the above. Chocolate, doorway of a Maramuru, sex.
But not
yes.
simultaneously.
If you want to run the experiment, just an airfare to Peru, let me know how you get on. I'll do it in my next lecture. But anyway, to give you a bit of perspective on where we are, so this is right near Lake Titicaca, so up at sort of 12,500, 13,000 feet. And it's just got this amazing geology. It's almost like a dinosaur spines, kind of Stegosaurus or something. So I just wanted to give you a bit of the ambience.
Back end of the doorway.
So I've climbed up on top of it at this point.
Just climbed above it. Dramatic landscape.
So we went back anyway. This was 11, 11, 11, and this was actually at the end. A lot of people had left. I'm going to just skip through because we've only got a quarter of an hour left. So I'll just give you a sense of what it was like. I mean, it was an amazing ceremony. These ancient sites still act as gathering places as we use Stonehenge. Around the world, people gather at special times. And whatever the kind of consecutive dates like 11, 11, 11 mean, or 12, 12, 12, anything that pulls a group of like-minded and aware people together is a good thing. I mean, we're starting to see the effects of group meditations and they've done lots of scientific experiments to show there is a noticeable effect. So it doesn't really matter what the date is. If we're coming together to be as we are here, then it's a powerful thing. And they had a lot of incense burning. You've got the pan pipes. I just sort of ducked out of this circle, I was in it. And so we spiraled around in and in and in until it was basically into a tight bunch. And then at 11, 11, everyone had a huge group hug. So it was quite special. So I'm just going to skip through some of these bits because I want to get cut to the chase. But what I was shown in Egypt in terms of this sound technology, the interaction with the sound that we create, the crystal structures, the effects on consciousness. Once I was given those insights in Egypt, I then took my my viewpoint, of course, to Peru, and then I started to see how these things are integrated into a lot of structures. Yesterday we were at West Kennet near Silbury Hill. I took a big drum up there and we did have an amazing experience. So it's here, it's something our ancestors did in England. Back in the Neolithic, it seems to have been a common trait where we would gather as a tribe or as a group There would be some kind of perhaps drumming, instruments, chanting, group sound use, and this is something that can give us a greater clarity. And there's different frequencies. I kind of see the lower sound frequencies as cleansing. It kind of excites our system and gets out emotional traumas, so that's sound healing. If anyone's done gong bath, anyone gone to gong baths or crystal bowl healings, that kind of thing? Well, I'll give you an example of it after this in the workshop space. But these are modalities that are commonly used now. It's not that difficult to find a sound healing. And these ancient sites, from my experience, are really capable of propelling that sound healing to another level. But we can at least get a taste of it and see if it's something we like in this country by going to these kind of events. So we're up again in the Andes. This is in the Sacred Valley. I mean, it's amazing. It's worth going to Peru just to see the snow-capped Andes, quite breathtaking. And at this particular site, Moray, somebody, and there's probably been some rebuilding, has sculpted out all of these circles in the top of the mountain. And I mean, it's a huge amount of work. And Brian Forster, I asked him to go back and look, and it does appear that they've sculpted the whole of this mountain, probably to get the acoustics of the site right, because it has got an amazing acoustic properties. And there's a few theories that they were sort of terraforming for agriculture and things, but they wouldn't need to sculpt the mountain in the way that it appears they have done for that purpose, I wouldn't have thought. And so there was three of us, and we were in the middle here, because if you're thinking of it kind of like a Roman Colosseum or something, perhaps they wanted an acoustic effect here that projects out if you've got people. And I mean, these layers are about 6 feet each, so it doesn't really work in my mind as an amphitheatre. So we were here, and there were some German tourists or something in this kind of region, and we had a small amount of the acoustic properties here, but we could hear them shouting across, and it was much louder, the amplification up the top. And my friend said to me, wow, you need to go up there and do your toning thing and see what happens. So we clambered up. And it was actually, I'll just show you this to give you a sense of it. And then we've got any people in there for scale. But it's an amazing place, quite otherworldly. Yeah, so we were kind of up here somewhere. And what's happened to a lot of the ancient sites, in my opinion, is because they've been rebuilt, or, I mean, they're in various states of disrepair. Originally, a lot of them, I think, would be more finely tuned to the feminine voice, because nowadays you need a very deep sound to get them working, but I don't think originally they would have necessarily been that way. It was a kind of higher vocal range. But this particular site is definitely, I would say, attuned to the feminine vocals, because it was right on the edge of my vocal range. I had to go up and up and up, and then suddenly I found this point, and the whole of the site kind of resonated, and I could just feel this energy pouring into my solar plexus area. And if you've done a lot of sound work, you know it does take quite a lot of energy to keep chanting. I normally get very hungry towards the end of the sessions. But in this particular case, the site, it was like a feedback loop. I was creating the sound, and the site was sending energy into my body to create more sound. And in the end, it was like I could just kind of disengage my brain, and I was the vessel that the site was creating this sound through. And while it was doing that, I could feel the separation of my soul from my physical body. So again, it was another one of these kind of lessons that we're not just the flesh and blood vehicle. It does get us around though. So we've seen Egypt, we've seen Peru, and here we are. This is a nice dolmen down in Dorset. We had a group toning in there, and again, good acoustics. And here I made a personal rediscovery. Haven't seen anyone else talking about this site in the way that I've kind of interpreted it. So let's have a look at the Devil's Den. And this is just down the road from West Kennet, Long Barrow and Silbury in Wiltshire.
So we're approaching the Devil's Den, feeling fairly normal.
Dark. think it'll brighten up. I'll turn the camera up.
How are you feeling at the moment, Nadine? Before we perform the experiment on you?
I'm feeling pretty calm.
Not worried at all?
No, not worried.
No, you trust me, do you?
Return ticket.
Ah. Return ticket from whence you came?
The co-pilot doesn't let me down. I shall return.
Ah. Here is the portal. Consciousness portal. Or the consciousness elevator.
The elevator.
Uh-huh.
The stargate.
So what I discovered was that in the capstone of this dolmen is a hole, and I mean it might be a male thing, but I saw a hole and I was thinking about sound, so I stuck my head in it, and so you've got this, it's almost like a helmet. I mean it kind of reminded me of Stargate, where this thing comes around and wraps around their head and they get this download. And it is again a crystalline stone similar to what they've used at Stonehenge. So if you're toning with the stone that close, I mean it really resonates very strongly around the skull, and it's the only place that I've ever seen sound coming out of my mouth as energy. I just saw this column of sound coming out one time, and Maria, who's giving the talk, she started to see colours. I mean the whole thing was uplifting, and I've given the directions to a variety of people, and they've all had amazing experiences there. So you can go to this site, and then it's good to sort of check in with yourself. Okay, so how am I feeling? What's my state of mind? Then have an experiment and kind of get involved with it. And this is the hole. See if that's any brighter. So yeah, it's quite a big indent. And then so when you're leaving, I mean I leave in a completely different uplifted state of mind. So it's something that we can all easily interact with and see how it affects us. And I've had good feedback. Okay, so we're just going to get to the last stage now. Right for 5:10? Okay. So it's interesting that they called this area the splendid place of the first time. I like that quote. So we're just going to step through. That's really washed out, huh? Can't do anything. I'm not having much luck with the slides. But anyway, that was an internal layout, and the entrance of the Great Pyramid is here. So we've got this ascending passageway, which we're seeing in the Grand Gallery, and we're going to head up, and this is the top chamber, the King's Chamber, because it is one of, or perhaps the most amazing place to use sound that I've ever had, because of the acoustics which we will hear. So I just want us to just travel with me up inside the Great Pyramid. Has anyone been to Egypt in the Great Pyramid? Got one, two? Yeah, we've got a few.
Oh my God. Can you see you on the other side? No. Okay, so we're going up the ascending passage in the Great Pyramid. I'm not supposed to be filming. I don't see people yet. Holy man.
I'm behind her.
I wonder how many people have fall to their death here.
That's like twos.
Oh my God.
So that leads us up to this, and we just follow Robert Baval up to the King's Chamber. This is the Grand Gallery. Very dark, probably. all the kind of the various details. The kind of the dimensions is the length 17.19 feet, 5.24 meters, width 34 feet, and yeah, so almost 20 feet high. And there was this just as you go into the King's Chamber, this sort of interesting feature, and it does look very much like this sort of sound dampening pad that you can buy online. So there are a lot of engineering features which, if we had more time, we could look at to look at how they've made it with such amazing acoustics. I think the most noticeable effect is that this granite, the crystalline granite, which has been moved 500 miles up the Nile to be put inside the Great Pyramid, and I mean it's about the same width as these slabs, and it's not rooted into the architecture around it in the Great Pyramid, so it's not into the surrounding limestone. There's actually a gap between the granite and the limestone, so it can resonate this chamber. And then there's these levels above it, which they call the relieving chambers. But various engineers have looked at the chambers that are above the King's Chamber, and they think that they've used it for tuning of the King's Chamber. So if I walk into the King's Chamber and I say hello, you get a hello, 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 gradually getting quieter and quieter. So it's quite amazing. And so when you're using that with sacred chant, it has a very powerful effect. So I'm just going to give you a sample of the being there, because it means a lot to me, and hopefully it sort of trigger something in you by hearing it. And I've probably been in there around 20 times and have had a lot of opportunities to test sounds. So we just have a couple of looks at what I've been up to. And also the last sound clip will demonstrate this sound frequency we were using to have this group out of body experience. The kind of echo or the resonance that touches you. Some of it's infrasound, so it's subaudible, but you can feel it with a sense of touch. The kind of testing, just these different sounds, because you feel the sound waves come over your body, so you kind of, with practice, you start to notice how it's interacting with your body and kind of energy. So that was my sort of testing phase, and this was the real ones that I've been using. was the main thing that I think the Great Pyramid taught me. Rather than just using this kind of that stays at one pitch, it seemed to encourage the going up the scale rather than just staying in one place, and that's what we've been using. And just to finish, coming to the end of the year, waiting to see how things settle down in Egypt, of course. But if all goes according to plan, we'll be back there in December, and for our next tour we're going to do a private visit to the island of Philae, where it had that block of stone where I know I can kind of plug people into the universe. So that's the latest thing that we've added. Visit me on Facebook, Infinite Connections PR. Lots of interviews from me and the various clients I work with. Thank you.
I really appreciate the talk, and even on these tough teething battles of babies and people crocking pots. But I'm really appreciative of what you do, because, as I said, people like Hakim are part of the oral tradition in Egypt, and we've got to keep them guys going, because they're the guys that pass the knowledge on to the selected people. And in England, we've got English heritage at the moment, and they are no different to the Egyptian museum guys. They're starting to close off all of the ancient sites, or move them or change them, and as I said, it's important that we sort of keep aware of these things, and I'm appreciative of Gary's work doing that. We have to say thanks and goodbye, because he's got to run to the other marquee now, because somebody's set up a timeline of almost remarkable truthing, where the poor man has to go from here to the other room and start another talk in about 15 minutes. Yeah. So shall we say thanks again, once again, to Gary. And, as he's on site over the day, you can attract him and ask questions about the various tours and some of his experiences. So thanks very much, and thanks very much for coming.
Thank you. Well, the workshop would be good to just give a demonstration of some of these things, because it's not something that's just an intellectual idea. We can experience it over there. And have
you got the bowls?
I have my bowl.
So to me, it's always worth 20 minutes in a crystal bowl, to be honest. So yeah, if you follow him to the marquee, if not, it's Lucy Wyatt here talking about the Ice Age and the Modern Age. So thanks very much, and I'll see you back in 10 or 15 minutes.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We take time.